First video of 2026, and it's a big one. So let's get started, shall we? As with many of my projects, I'm usually inspired by a single piece that I build the entire project around. In this case, it's this, which I believe was a leg off of some children's toy. I'm going to use these two parts here to build the torso / upper body of my robot. And that gray stuff that's in the pink head on the right is 2-part epoxy putty from a previous project. And these two pieces will fit together something like this. And so I'm going to have to use my jeweler's saw and cut away some of the plastic to make the two pieces fit together. I'm going to use these two pieces of plastic caps, glue them together, and this will help the transition between the upper and the lower half. And I'm going to attach them with some of this epoxy putty and a wire. I'm making sure that this joint is really strong because it's the connection between the upper and the lower half, and this guy ends up being pretty tall by the end. This epoxy putty cures in about 20 minutes, so it's great for quick, strong attachments like this. I add a couple of greeblies and then I can attach the two parts together, making sure that those tubes in the side align with my greeblies. The basic shape of the torso is looking pretty good. Now I just have to build out the shoulders and the hip joints. For the shoulders, I'm going to be using these caps from a super glue container, and I want to glue them to the side, but you can see they don't sit flush against those protrusions, so I sand them down and that gives me a nice flat area to glue to. I do a very similar process with the hip joints using these caps from some type of squeeze container. And then to cover up the back area, I'm using a couple more greeblies from some action figures and some broken car toys. Not only does this cover up the epoxy putty in the back, but it also adds a pretty cool shape. I want to add a couple of fuel tanks on the back of the torso, and so I'm going to use the squishy bulb part on the end of this pipette. I cut off a few, but as you can see, they're a bit too squishy, so I'm going to inject them with a bit of plaster of Paris. So if you are squeamish about needles, look away now. I've used this technique before with epoxy glue, but I prefer the plaster of Paris because it's cheaper and easier to clean up if I make a mess. I carefully inject the plaster into the bulbs and then let them cure, which usually takes about 20 minutes or so. Okay, the needle has been put away and it will stay away for the rest of the video, I promise. I add a few more greeblies just to fill in any holes, and then I drill 2 holes in the back that will take the fuel tanks, which I'll add once everything is painted. The last thing I do for the torso is to build some shoulder armor, which I believe was already shoulder armor from another kid's toy that I took apart, and the only thing I'm going to do to it is add one of these pen clips and trim it down to size. For the arms, I'm going to build them out of a pair of legs. These legs came from this little posable action figure toy, and legs are just kind of long arms, so I think it'll work out well. I'm also going to use this Gundam part, cut it in half, glue the 2 halves back together, and this will make up the top of the hip joint. This part here comes from a Gundam flight unit, which is basically just a fancy jetpack. I attach the 2 parts together using a pin and some super glue, and I purposely leave that space in the center so that I can fill it with epoxy putty. Now the reason I'm doing this is because 1, it extends the arm a bit and makes it longer, which is what I wanted, and 2, it allows me to build sort of an implied joint there that's been covered with a rubber seal. Now that probably didn't make any sense, so I'm going to try to find some photos to show what I'm talking about. Basically, in some robotic concept images that I've seen, they cover up the moving parts and the joints with this sort of rubber cover, and that keeps any rocks and other debris from getting in and jamming up the joints. So that's what I'm trying to replicate here. I use that EP200 epoxy putty for the top half, but for the bottom part, I'm going to be using Milliput because it takes a lot longer to cure, and this is more of a delicate, small area to work with, so I want a bit more time. I add small bits of milliput, and then using that same technique as before, a silicone-tipped sculpting tool with a bit of isopropyl alcohol, I sculpt in the folds and creases and the excess material that you would need for a moving part like this. This is my first time trying this technique, so let me know down below if this is actually reading as what I'm trying to make it look like. I'm working on the blaster Gatling gun thing that he's holding, and this is part of the arm section because he's holding onto it in his arms, and it's an extension of his arms, so that's why. I'm just sort of adding bits and pieces from my Greeblies box until I'm happy with the final result, including some googly eyes, some half cabochon pearls, and a couple more of those fuel tanks that I made earlier. I knew that this was going to be a heavy weapon that he was going to need both hands for, so I built the hands into the handles, and I'm using modified Gundam hands here, and the handles are just made out of some styrene and wire. I'll permanently attach the blaster, the right hand, and the right arm together, and then I'll attach the left hand, left handle, and left arm all together permanently, but I'm not going to attach the arms in place yet because it'll make it easier to paint if they're all separate. The legs for this project actually came together pretty easy. I'm using this piece here, which is from a Gundam flight unit, as the upper leg or the thigh, and the first thing I do is I fill this open space with a piece of styrene that I cut down to shape. For the bottom part of the leg, I'm going to be using this action figure part, and I'm just going to get rid of this little fin on top so it looks like this. This part here is the other half of the pen clip from the shoulders, and I'm going to use it as sort of a knee cover. I can glue it in place with some super glue, and then using a wire, I can attach the bottom half of the leg to the top half and secure it with some more super glue. I add a few pieces of armature wire to fill out the shape, and then I can start working on the feet. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, building robot feet is not very fun for me and pretty difficult. So I'm just going to steal some feet from some other robot and call it good. And just like that, I built a robot foot, and all I needed was a piece of styrene, a ball joint, and a robot foot. The leg is all put together, and I just have to build another one to match. Look at that. For the neck, I'm going to be using that piece that I cut off from the original torso, and it's going to sit like this. And you remember that piece that I took off from the flight unit? I'm going to drill out the center so it's just the ring around the outside. I'm going to glue a little ball joint on it, and then I'm going to glue this entire thing to the top of my neck. This will become the attachment point for the head and allow me to move the head in sort of any direction that I want to pose it in. I'll also add one more ring from a broken pen, and then I'll attach everything with some super glue and another pin. The head is pretty simple. It's just this aluminum cap here and this plastic cap, and they will fit together like this. For the face, I found this piece off of a Gundam shield, and it already looks like a cool Bionicles Star Wars kind of mask. So I'm just going to fill the hole in the center with a piece of armature wire, and then I'm going to add a few beads that I cut in half into the eye holes to add some cool factor, and it will also give me a place to add some lenses later. I think this face may be my favorite part of the build, so I'm super happy that I found it. I can then attach it to the head using some more of that 2-part epoxy putty and some super glue. I add a pin to the underside of the head, I drill a hole in the ball joint, and then I can attach the two pieces together. Everything is fully built now, I just have to prep everything for painting, which means I give everything a scrub down with this wire brush to make sure that the paint sticks. And the first layer of paint is a coat of flat white primer. Once that flat white primer is dried, I can start on the real color base coat. For that, I'm using this Cavalry Brown and my Galeri Mobius 0.3. If you're interested in this airbrush or anything else from Galeri, I have a link in the description to their website as well as a coupon code for 10% off your order. I'm still pretty new to airbrushing, so I'm just using it to base coat most things now, but it does really speed up my process and helps me achieve a nice smooth coat to work from. That cavalry brown that I showed at the beginning isn't actually airbrush ready right out of the bottle, so you do have to thin it down slightly. But I just use water and thin it down till it's kind of a milk consistency, and that seems to work for me. Now this gunmetal is airbrush ready, so you can just put it straight from the bottle into the airbrush. I use this metallic on the fuel tanks, those fins on the side of the leg, and the Gatling blaster thing. I still don't really know what to call it. Moving on now to hand painting, I'm going to start with this desert yellow and start adding some detail colors. I thin my paint down very slightly with some water. I find this makes it a bit easier to paint, but it does mean that I have to add maybe like one extra layer of paint, which is fine by me because I already have to do multiple layers. What you're seeing here is one layer, the first layer. I usually put 2 to 3 depending on the color and the coverage. Now comes the time where I get to do a shout out to my patrons, or in this case my patron, Richie. Thank you so much. You've been with me since basically the beginning of my Patreon experience, so thank you. I really do appreciate your support, and I appreciate all of you for watching. If you would like to join good old Richie and see your name flying across my screen during the painting process, you can join my Patreon. I'll have links in the description at the end of this video and on my page. Not only do you get a sweet shout out in every video, you also get behind the scenes footage from my builds every week. I send photos there that I don't post online. And by online, I mean like Instagram and Facebook and other social media like that. If that's something that interests you, please check it out, but of course, no pressure to join at all. I really just appreciate even just watching and doing nothing else. But if you do want to support me for totally free right now, you can do so by liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing, all that good stuff that every YouTuber wants you to do. All of that really does help grow the channel, and those notifications I get because someone commented or liked my video or shared my video really help inspire me to make more art. So yeah, more painting and such. This guy took a lot of paint and a lot of time to paint because he's so tall and lanky, so there was a lot of surface area to cover. I also wasn't happy with the first coats of red I was doing, so I had to mix up some custom reds and just keep on adding more layers, so that added a lot more paint time as well. I just picked these colors because I thought they looked cool together. I don't really have a story or a purpose for this robot yet. Like usual, I'm just going to leave it up to you as the audience. Let me know down below in the comment section what you think this robot's purpose is, what it was built to do, what it actually does, what its name is. You guys come up with some really, really cool ideas, and I always love reading the stories and the ideas you have for these robots. I'm going to add a few of these water decals. These are from some Navy Hellcats, they're old World War II planes. And I'm still very new to decals in general. And so I know this is definitely not like the way to do them, but it worked out for me. And a lot of this stuff is going to get weathered and painted anyways, so they don't have to be perfect. A little Avatar Last Airbender reference here. I add a few more decals, just some random numbers that I like. They don't really mean anything, but they look kind of cool, so rule of cool. I can then attach a few things together, the fuel tanks in the back. I can attach the head into the position that I want for the final look. And then I could paint the front fuel tanks. I end up matching them to the fuel tanks in the back. I do this so last minute because I really wasn't sure what color I wanted. And then I coat everything in matte clear. Moving on to weathering, which is one of my favorite parts of the entire building process. Here's everything pre-weathered. You can see nice and shiny. I'm now realizing that these are the colors of Iron Man. I did not intend that. I was also told that this guy looks like a football or a 49ers player, and now I can't unsee that. This first round of weathering that I'm doing is called blackwash. It's a mix of black and sometimes brown acrylic paint mixed with some water and a little bit of isopropyl alcohol just to break the surface tension. I cover everything and then lightly dab it away with a paper towel or a tissue, and then that just leaves a nice layer of grime over everything. I then go in with a silver, same silver I've been using this whole project, and I'll add some chipping effect over some of the corners and edges, anywhere where the paint would naturally chip and expose the raw metal underneath. This is a great technique that adds a lot of scale and detail to miniatures like this. I use this Tamiya Weathering Master kit for the final layer of weathering. It's a little palette of this really highly compressed powder pigments, sort of like a eyeshadow kit, and I use a makeup sponge brush. I get kind of a mix of the brown and rust color, and I can apply it onto the surface of my model. I start by working on the edges of the piece and then work my way into the center flat parts. This is a great technique, but it doesn't always fit into those small cracks and crevices, so I still use some other washes. This is kind of a mix of a rusty, oily stain in some of the areas where my makeup sponge brush just won't reach. So I go back and forth between the Tamiya weathering kit and that oil stain and cover the entire project in a nice greasy, grimy layer of dirt and oil. I don't think I've ever made a perfectly clean and pristine model ever, and I don't think I ever will. I don't think it's physically possible for me. I need to add dirt and grime. I finish up the model by adding a plastic lens to each eye, and then I can lay everything out and start putting it all together. Here is all the parts all weathered and ready to go together. I just use super glue to attach everything, and then I do a final coat of matte clear, and this project is pretty much done. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the video. I know that was a long one, so thanks for sticking around and listening to me talk about gluing pieces of trash together and painting it for 17 whole minutes. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, put them down in the comment section and I'll try to get back to you. I do read every single comment and I try to respond if I can. If you did like this video, please consider subscribing, liking, commenting, all that good stuff, and check out the rest of my channel, because if you like this one, you're almost guaranteed to like another one that I've made. I've got over 100 other videos on my channel, so check those out if you got some time. Thanks again for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.